Hey everybody, a little Zbrush sculpting today. I'll try to watch the chat, see if you guys have any questions. If you have any questions, pop them over there for sure. All right, so it is showing that that's there. Cool. All right. So I just started learning Zbrush about a year ago. It's a new tool for me. And I've been very excited about it. It does a lot of the things that I always wished I could do in sculpting. And it was just a little too, not too hard, but too frustrating for me to be able to do physically sculpting things. But I feel like this kind of checks a bunch of boxes that I wanted to be able to do with regular sculpting with clay and stuff that I just never really felt like I had the patience or the skill to do. So what I have for today is I picked a painting by Mike that had this really cool, I always thought this was just the coolest. I love the painting in general because it's got two other guys below it and everything, but I loved this guy. I mean, he just looks awesome. I love the, kind of perspective of it, and it's just a cool lighting, cool face, everything. So I thought that I would sculpt this with the intention of 3D printing it. I've had an FDM printer for a while, which has been a lot of fun. Recently got a resin printer, an inexpensive, smaller one, just to learn how to do that. So I thought I would have some fun with this and see if I could get something close to his giant that we could eventually 3D print. Again, there's kind of a delay because I've only got one screen, so I've got another thing showing me YouTube Live. So I will try to look over there every now and then for chat. I'm just going to do a little test here, make sure. Okay, looks like that's live. So for those of you not familiar with ZBrush, this is kind of where you start. You can start, generally I start with a circle, a sphere, but you can honestly start with a cube, a cylinder, a cone, any of these kind of things you can start with. The user interface I have here is actually a custom user interface that the guy that I took a class from uses. And it was just easier to follow along with him with his interface. So I've gotten to where I'm used to using it. So I just continue to use it. So if you actually have ZBrush, your interface might look a little different. It is pretty easy to customize to make it look however you want. This is the layout that I'm used to using. I just know where some of the buttons are that we used a lot. While I'm on the subject of ZBrush is an amazing, awesome program. I've also recently been using Nomad Sculpt on my tablet, which is an amazing, awesome program as well. You can do a lot with that. It's way less expensive. So if you wanted to try your hand at some 3D sculpting in the virtual realm, Nomad Sculpt, I would highly, highly recommend that. I've been having a lot of fun with that. You can sit with your iPad, or I have a Samsung tablet. You can sit there and watch TV and sculpt all the way to a printable thing there, or start a sculpt there and bring it into ZBrush and finish it off in ZBrush. ZBrush has definitely got some tools in it that Nomad does not. But having said that, I've been very, very impressed with Nomad, especially for the huge price difference. And the people that are doing Nomad Sculpt are very regularly releasing updates and stuff. So they're very active, as are the ZBrush crew. So again, we're going to look at how I went from a circle to try to get something like this. I haven't completely finished the sculpture just because of time, but I'll kind of give you guys an idea of how I go about this. So the first thing I do is let's see. I brought in a plane and put the guy back there just so I could have him for reference. ZBrush takes a little while to get used to some of the keystrokes and stuff to move things around. This is just a mouse click, Alt, moves it like this, push Alt, click, and let off Alt, and you can zoom in and out like that. So basically what I would do, or what I do when I sculpt something, is just like I would in a physical sculpture. I basically start with a framework. So here I have used spheres and cylinders, all spheres and cylinders, just to kind of make his body. So very, very rudimentary, but it gives me somewhere to start. Chest, kind of his belly there, lower body. The painting cuts off at his lower body, so that's about as much as you can see, and I will eventually just cut that straight across, and that'll be the base. Arms, hands, and then the rock. So the way that I got to there is start with a circle, and that was his head. And then I added what would become his belly. A little mid guy for his chest. So basically you're just stacking circles. Super, super rudimentary, and kind of giving it like, you know, he's kind of holding his, I mean, with his hands up over, you know, his head's going to be forward because he's hoisting that rock up, which pushes his chest and shoulders back, and then kind of belly forward there. Arms, super simple. And the cool thing about ZBrush is, like, I can build 2 cylinders like this. All right. Let it save for a second there. Oh, crash. That's another thing about ZBrush, is it does like to crash sometimes. I am using a Cintiq Companion 2, so I've upgraded the RAM, but it's not the most powerful dude in the world running all this at the same time. But we'll get back into it here. And you'll see it's going to pop up and say that I'm using a trial version. And ZBrush is good about when it crashes, it does try to save what it crashed. You get to see how I go back in. So if you do have a custom UI, you can load the UI pretty easy. So then there's the UI. I can go back and load my tool. So this is where we were. It brings it in. That nice red color. Oops. You bring it back in, go to edit. I'm going to change my material because I prefer gray to the red. So back to where we were. For these arms, basically you're just going in here, and so ZBrush, these are the subtools. So every piece there I've got as a separate subtool. Almost like layers in Photoshop, ZBrush does have a layers feature that, quite honestly, I don't know how to use. So for me, this is like layers in Photoshop. If you want to add another layer, you go to append. Let's say we wanted to make another arm. We've just appended that cylinder in there. Then we can go and you can, so this is Gizmo and the Move tool. So you can stretch it out this way. Using these little guys, you can flatten it if you want. Like in most programs, Control-Z is an undo. Make it bigger and smaller. You can move it around, angle it. So to make these arms, basically I just and then if you do a control drag, you can actually pull another little guy off there, turn him that way. These little arrows keep you moving within the planes, or you can use these guys. I always want to be moving around, but basically there is a very, very rudimentary arm. Great thing about Zbrush is I don't have to do that twice. I can duplicate that and then I can mirror it. And if, well, I didn't have that as two. I had one. So when you pull another one off, this one's technically I remember the name. Hidden. It's not hidden, but it's masked. So you can duplicate that one and then mirror him over, and then basically there's both of them, and then you can move them into. If I had him here, it would have just mirrored it to there, and then we would have had both arms. So from here, start to giving him a little bit of face here. Very rudimentary. You're working from big forms to small forms. Kind of smooth them out here. You can go really big like that guy and then do a shift and you can smooth them out. Basically, to get a circle to that kind of face shape. Zbrush crashing. It's going to be a fun hour if Zbrush crashes every time I try to do something. Alright, so you get to see the load UI plenty of times. Load them up there again. We're going to go to edit, change it to gray. So the other cool thing about Zbrush is I'm going to pin another circle there, and I'm going to go down here. This is going to be a fun stream if this keeps happening. This guy. Another reason to get a new computer. So I'm just going to do it this way this time. I'm not going to load a tool. I'm just going to start with a sphere again. So we're going to draw out our sphere. We're going to go to edit. We're going to do basic material. And when you pull one of these guys out, you got to make it a polymesh 3D, which is what makes it where you can actually sculpt it. So that little guy right there basically shows you where your brush is. So you got standard brush, lots of different brushes, very much like Photoshop. The cool thing about ZBrush is you can go activate symmetry, and then whatever you do on one side happens on the other side. So to get to kind of a head shape, what I normally would do is go to the move brush. And that's one that I use a lot. And basically, you just want to give it the shape of a head. Whatever I'm doing on one side, it's doing that on the other side as well. And we'll give it like a little bean shape here. So that is the cool thing about virtual, is it's, if I were sculpting a mask or something, I tend to use both hands anyway, so it's kind of similar to what I do anyway, but I mean, it just does it easier. So you can go in and kind of demarcate where things would be. You have your eyes down here. So basically that is where that is how I got to that head shape. So move tool, lots of move tool, cutting in, moving some forms around, and just getting kind of a general head shape. You can see here, I also went up here and started using just the move tool on those cylinders. And basically, you're just squishing them into each other, making the forms of the arms there. So that was my next step. I started getting a head, started getting arm shapes in there, smoothed all this guy out, just kind of giving it a body form, but still very large forms, still very loose. So here we have merged the body forms into one form here. So you basically come over here and you tell it to do a merge, which is in this area here. You merge them all together and then you can just smooth them together. So I've got kind of a general body form. I probably pulled down some of that and did a lot of smoothing, and then just started blocking in more of the face. So, you know, it's still very rough, very bubblegummy. But again, what ZBrush does for you that helps is that you're only really, like, I move around a lot and move back and forth from either side just because that's what I'm used to doing physically. But technically, you could do it all on one side and it mirrors it on that other side. So a lot of this kind of stuff is just the clay buildup, which you can, it's a little large. But you can see, I mean, that's just doing those kind of movements. And then you can come back in, you can press Alt, and you can dig in and kind of dig some of that out if you want to. Which is how you do some of the stuff like in the ear here. You can hollow that out, you push Alt, dig back in there, hollow it out. But again, no real detail, just kind of still laying out where forms are. Looks like I got into this arm a little bit, gave him a little tricep area, a little shoulder area, forearm area there. Hands still just very rudimentary. Things like hands, you can pin, sphere, select the sphere, move it over here. I'm going to go to draw, move, make it a little small first. Draw, zoom in. Basically for the hands, I just flatten. Everything's wanting to mess up now. So basically, your hands are kind of that shape. So your fingers will go all along there. And then pull out the area where your thumb would be. You can make a little clay, 2 little pads there, and then you got to run a pad across there. just to kind of demarcate where everything would be. Your fingers will be here, 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 here. And then you can. So this brush dam standard cuts in for every brush. If you press Alt, it does the opposite. So this one actually, main focus is cut in. You press Alt, it actually pulls out. So you can, you know, give yourself kind of the indication of where tendons and things would be. And that's pretty fast, but Shift, if you hold Shift, everything will smooth. Getting a really good view of my insulation up there now. Let's see if we can get this set back up here. So again, that's a little bit farther than I've taken the hands there, but I'll show you where I went from there. This is giant 4. So here you can see I've done a little bit more on the face. I've added 2 spheres right in there for the eyes. It always helps to have the eyes in place. And there's all kinds of, you know, when you look at sculpting things, you know, you have, so basically that's just the eyeball, and then we would do the lids, and then basically you got about an eyeball's width between the 2 eyeballs. And then you got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyeballs across. So that gives you kind of an idea of what you want the eyeball size to be. But again, this is just all just further refining. Did a little smoothing probably. 6. All right, so that was a huge jump. So basically, lots of refinement happened from that last one to this one. And one of the main refinements was I always like to bounce ideas off of people that are sculptors. So that was the head that I had. And based on that reference, figured out that that head was too big. So went from that head to that. Made him a little smaller, a little more circular. Which, if you were doing that physically with clay, would not be a very easy move to make. But in Zbrush, you basically do this, bring it out a little bit, and you got a smaller, almost exactly what I ended up with. So that is one of the amazing things about this tool, is that a move that would be a almost complete resculpt becomes just a couple of moves, and amazingly efficient. Is one of the things I love about it, is you're not wasting a lot of time. I'm way less discouraged by changes than I used to be, because of the ease of being able to do things like that. Like that to me is just a huge stress off and amazing. And I never really took commissions before because I don't like suddenly you have drastic changes that have to happen way down the line of the sculpt, and then digital realm, that's so much easier to do. So much easier to do. So you can see here, I've gone back and I've made his lids, which is pretty easy to do. I don't still have the spheres there, but basically you just duplicate the spheres and then you enlarge them a little bit and then you cut part of them off and then you have lids. Like, amazing, nice looking. And for something like this, this is not meant to be like a full-size sculpture. So like you want to be able to see what it looks like from about that distance. That's going to be something, you know, about tabletop size. If you were doing a mini, you want to be able to see differentiation in the parts from about that size in order for it to show up in something like a 32. You don't have to do a whole lot of minute detail for a miniature at all. It's all big details. Because this is not going to be something life size, it doesn't have to be super duper detailed. How we're going to print this, and it was going to be, 4 or 5 inches tall, I could put some skin texture on that, and the printer would probably print a good approximation of it, and it would look pretty good for paint, pretty easy to paint. But you can see I've gone in here and just really kind of slapdash with the brush called Damn Standard, which just cuts a line, went into these arms, and just kind of gave myself an approximation of where muscles would be, and then can come back to that and further refine that later. So here is where I started getting into the hands a little bit more. And again, the beauty of ZBrush is really you only have to do one, and then it'll take care of the other one for you. Sorry, I'm trying to get my computer to stay tilted up here. So again, this is just all standard brush, which when you are sculpting does that squared form anyway. And another crash. Sorry guys and girls and people, folks. A painting video should go smoother than this. Let's see if we're in the right place here. One back. Oh, 8. So back here. So back to the hand. So standard brush just used to make these forms. Kind of give us an idea where the knuckles and stuff are. Give you a little bit of that fat pad on the side there. Same fat pad you have on your, similar fat pad you have on your thumb part of the palm. And then all the rest are simply cylinders. And basically I made one set and then just control moved it over, scaled it up, control moved it over, scaled it down a little bit, control moved it over, scaled it down, and then moved it over and scaled it there. And then again, the beauty of the program is I don't have to make another one. I can just duplicate this one. And then mirror it. And then almost put it in the right spot. Hide that one. Just move it around and get it where you want it. So that's how you would get to that. And the next part is just further refining of the fingers. So that's lots of merging and smoothing and just more clay brush to kind of accentuate where the knuckles would be, where the fingernails would be. And again, even though I probably duplicated that and moved it over, I probably only did this on one hand. I know I did that on one hand and then just reduplicated it, moved it over again. Looks like I didn't do too much more on the face there for that one. So here I have readjusted the arms a little bit to get closer to what it looks like he's doing. I'm assuming that I kept looking at it thinking that about like that would be where his body would be. So I haven't positioned his head because in order to stay in symmetry in Zbrush, I didn't want to move his head because once I move it, the symmetry's off after that. So I'm leaving it there until I get to a point where I'm done working in symmetry. I think I have it pretty much set, and then I can start working asymmetrically and give him like a snarl by lifting this up and squinting his eyes a little bit more. I added a little bit of texture for hair here, which was simply an alpha in ZBrush. So it looks like he's got like a kind of a really short buzz haircut there. So I just did that kind of texture again because we're looking at something that's going to be smaller, kind of like that. So you can kind of see a little bit of differentiation there. But it's not as drastic as when you look at it super close. And then for things like the eyebrows and the mustache and the beard, I basically did an extraction. So you can go in and you can mask off an area. So like for the eyebrows, you can do something like that. And you can tell it, you punch Control and click on it. Control Alt. Make it a little bit more delineated. And you can come over here and you can do extract, and you can kind of tell the thickness, and you can do extract, and then basically that gives you just a little bit of meat there to work with, and then you can go in and start. But it's basically just sitting on that other plane in the same shape and everything, and it makes things like eyebrows and stuff way easier. The overhead in there makes things look weird. And the cool thing about ZBrush is like you can go through here with these eyeballs and you can turn on, turn off, whatever you want. You can just look at certain parts together if you want. You don't have to look at everything all the time. And it allows you to get into, if I wanted to sculpt in here on this arm and couldn't see it because of the head, I can just make his head go away and then get in there and sculpt, which again is very nice. That would be difficult to do in a physical sculpture, not undoable, but difficult to do. So here I've gone back and in some of those extractions using mostly Damn Standard, which is the name of this brush that kind of cuts in and pops back out. And then I use some alphas as well, just to give it a little bit of a texture, but to give it some of that beardy, eyebrowy texture. So the other thing I've done here is I went into his body and I did another extract to bring out this vest he's wearing. So basically I just Control and made all that dark and then did an extract and pulled that out. Same thing with the belt, went right across there and started to get things that I can work with to make vests and belts and things like that. And then from there, can manipulate those extractions just like everything else. Most of this was move tool kind of things. The newer versions of Zbrush have lots of cloth, the ability to move cloth around. Sorry guys and girls. If you guys have any questions, throw them into the YouTube chat. I'll try to answer them. I think I was around 11 here. So I would have to say that normally, if I'm not streaming, Zbrush does not crash like this. I do not have to put up with this on a normal day. So if that makes or break you wanting to get Zbrush, just know that that is not an occurrence that usually happens. So again, to do vest and things like that, it's mostly just move tool. I did come back and sculpt after I moved it around a little bit, but the cool, like you can just pull it out, move it around. Yeah, it's going real slow because of the stream. But anyway, so it's a lot of just moving and then going back and seeing shapes I like, just like I would do physically. I like this shape here, so I came back. Oh, it's a little much, but accentuate it with some sculpting. Thinking about where folds and things like that would be. And then once you've done that, you can come back and press the shift key on any brush you're on, and it becomes the smooth tool, and you can smooth those back. You can see where I've taken that damn standard brush that just cut the line and kind of given myself an idea of where that he has his shirt is sewn together there, so that's kind of where that would be. My setup here keeps falling. I'm ever gonna stream some ZBrush stuff, I'm gonna have to get a better computer than this for sure. Oh, okay. That wasn't actually a crash. That's something got. That's just taking him a little further than the last time. And basically, this next one is where I've ended up, which doesn't look too much different than the other one, except for the fact that I've done a little bit more kind of in his vest here. I just realized I must not have saved the very, very last thing I did. So I'd gone back, and what I would do now and what I had done, but I guess I didn't save it, was kind of fix this shirt a little bit so that it doesn't look so flat. I'll go over here and I'll select this shirt. I'm actually just going to smooth that out, get rid of that. There's a little bit of clay buildup to fill that back in a little bit. I did the last time. Stand up here so I can see it. So what I did the last time, instead of cutting that in, I actually came back and using Alt, gave myself a little bit of a lip there to follow. And then no Alt. Come back and cut it underneath. That gives a little bit more dimension and clay buildup. Fill in this kind of back area so that it doesn't look quite so lipped up. And again, for a small mini, basically, this is just going to make it a little bit more visible. Turn on what's called lazy mouse there, which gives me just a little bit of the ability to control it just a little bit. Oh, it's the wrong brush. And then again with this is just going to give me a less even surface. Actually make it where I can just see that. So basically, if you had your hands above your head, your shirt would be pulling tight there and have a little bit of a gully going there. And I don't have symmetry on, so that's why I'm having to kind of go back and forth on both sides. And then you can just shift, and this becomes a smooth brush. Leave some of that texture. Leave some of that texture there. And as with any sculpture, it's just a lot of back and forth. So you're adding detail, you're taking it away. You're refining it, always refining. I'll go back to damn standard. And I'm going to try to catch this edge and accentuate it a little bit more. Same thing here. I'm going to a little bit more meat in there. That doesn't look quite so drastic. All the way up here, a little bit more smoothing. Let's see the rest of it. Now I'm switching to move. I want that to be a little bit. I want to bring the shirt outside of this though. And then you can go eventually and do stuff like this. So if you wanted to, let's see, let me give myself a little bit more resolution there. That's too much right here. You can very easily go through and make it look like he's stitched his shirt together. And that's basically just a brush I bought called Stitch. And do little details like that. And again, for something that's not going to be super big, it's a little drastic, but it does not look too bad. You do notice. So depending on what tool you're on, ZBrush will change the color. So the one I'm on right now is this light gray. Everything else is darker gray. So I can see I'm got a little bit of shirt poking out over here. I just go to the move tool, just push that back in, and you go on in there. You got a little bit poking out there, just push that in and go on. So then eventually, again, like I said, I haven't positioned his face or anything just because I wanted to be able to maintain symmetry. But eventually what I will do is I will move that. I'm going to do this. So right now I've selected multiple tools here. So I've got everything that's part of his head. I think. Yeah. I've also got his body. Control Shift and turn that off. So now what I can do is when it comes time to position his head, I got something. Everything that doesn't have stripes on it, I now have control of. So I can come back in here and much more like the, I don't know, I guess I got symmetry on, which is anything up. Symmetry off. But now more like what Mike drew, I can come in here and kind of position his head. So that we have it at kind of a similar angle to what the reference was. And I'll of course have to go back and add some neck behind him and everything like that, but that's a little bit closer to what the reference looks like. Cut him flat there and he'll sit on the table. If I were going to add some neck in there, I would append another sphere. Over here and find it. I'm going to find his arms. I'm going to take the move tool, make it really big. And basically just start making this. Down and dirty neck. Sweet on it. You can go back. I'll switch to clay buildup here. A little detail. It's actually a little twisted. Let's see what's coming over here. And again, this kind of looks weird because it's not melded with the body yet, but once it's melded, it'll look a little better. Oops. Undo. Back in. Look at here. So that would be a start for a neck. Lots of tweaking to do to that, but that gets him more like the reference, which would be that. And again, very stylized, of course, not exactly like the reference. And the other thing you can do is you can go back in here and go back to the head. And I don't have symmetry on, so you can start messing with parts of it. And then you got kind of a back and forth. You got to come back and pull that guy back out. Back to the head. Bunch him up a little bit if he were snarling. Maybe use the inflate a little bit to give him a little puff in that area. Also, move this whole area up. And if you do it for one, you gotta do it for both. Start giving them a little character here. Go back to his eyes. Whoa. He's squinting a little bit with this one. Make this one a little bit wider open. Actually, I guess that might be the opposite if he were. You really quickly start giving him some personality. Do it about like that. Looks like he's looking down. Those other two dudes could be down here that are in the painting. And that's probably still a little too wide open. So yeah, so we're getting towards the end here, but sorry about all the crashes and everything, but I hope this kind of showed you guys kind of a little bit about how I would make something like this in ZBrush. Lots left to do, but it's an amazing tool, and I've really enjoyed learning it. The barrier to entry is, I would say, not any harder than anything like Photoshop, and it is like Photoshop where everybody can do the same thing that knows how to use Photoshop, but they all come about it in a different way. Highly recommend it. If you think you're interested in it, I would, at the very least, download Nomad Sculpt if you have a tablet of some sort, because Nomad has a very familiar workflow to it, to me, compared to ZBrush. So that would give you an idea of whether you thought this was a step to take. There's tons of YouTube videos, tons of online schools. I took a class through the Vertex School, sculpting miniatures in ZBrush, that I found exceptionally helpful. That's where I learned most everything I know how to do in ZBrush, and then continually learning other things by watching so many free resources that are out there. So thank you guys for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on the Eridani Discord. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. Again, not an expert in any way, but I've really enjoyed this as a tool to have in my sculpting arsenal. So hold on one second here. So I will post kind of where I ended up here on the Discord, and then I'll also post a picture of the painting. This is just a clip of the painting, but Mike's whole painting is a beautiful painting. We'll put that up too, so you can see where I got the inspiration for this sculpture. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.